Hello, this is part 24 of the mod making series for locked loot containers. Um, in this one, I really probably don't have that much to say, but I'll try to explain what I did. So I basically did what I basically just did more of what I did yesterday or whatever in the last video, in that I was filtering out sort of the um the objects that were being overlapped by the physics overlap thing for the loot piles and stuff. But instead of the just the models, I did the other possible things, or at least the other possible things that I care about, that being the billboard flats, like the stuff in a room, like the lights, other loot piles, other decorations, whatever, stuff like that, as well as the enemies or whatever, the enemy entities, the enemy entities that are there as well, like the thief, skeletons, anything, bats, rats, all that crap. I basically did the exact same thing for those, except I just had to do a little bit of searching into them to basically determine what would be the best, or at least in for my purposes, the best uh, identifying attributes to use, and then extract those and then use those later on, similar to what I did here with the models. In that case, I did, like they said, the mesh filter thing, which then I was able to get the model ID eventually by doing some weird stuff with substring method to take the name out of the mesh filter dot mesh dot name, and then after a little bit of messing around I was able to get that into that value to a number, like an actual number instead of a string, and then I should hopefully be able to use that later on as I want to determine the models, because I'll still have to do the models, like go through them manually and like be like, okay, so that thing is a cabinet, that thing is a bed, that thing is a door, all that stuff. I'll still have to do that manually, which is fine. It's just I'll be able to do with this stuff automatically as I identify it, and then filter it out from there and change what it does based on that. And like I said, I've just done the exact same things for the other things that are not models, that being the billboard flats, or whatever you want to call them, the billboard decoration items and such, loot piles and everything, and the uh enemies, the enemy mobiles. Now, one thing I do, like I noted here that I have to remember, is that these billboards being flats now, they can be replaced by mods to make them into models, I think. Yeah. So I'm gonna have to consider that at the end of the day. I don't know. Yeah, I am gonna have to consider that for stuff like hand painted models and other mods. But for right now, I'll just assume, for like I said, for right now, I'll just assume that I'm working with the vanilla, not modded in this case. I'll be concerned about that later on for stuff like hand painted models and such. But yeah. So what I did with the billboards specifically was, like I said, very similar, actually easier than with the models. Because with the billboards, they have a component attached to them just called Daggerfall billboard, which I then use to find this other attribute that is a part of that called billboard summary, which is essentially just a bunch of useful data that that specific billboard has attached to it, such as the type of flat that it is, like be it um yeah, at least what it's categorized under, that be it it's a NPC flat, it's a decoration, which are probably most of them, it's an editor flat, which are the things that it uses to mark stuff before, like you're not supposed to see these editor markers, but they are there. just basically to mark where something is. Animals, such as the ones that you'll see in towns and stuff, just ambient animals, whatever. Light or nature flat, which I believe are just um, any of the flats that you could see outside and the exteriors and stuff. I used this value and I used a if statement afterward to basically say only care about flat types that are the only care about flat types that are not editor and not nature types. So it'll consider all the other ones for this filtering process, but not the editor ones and not the nature ones, because maybe the nature ones later, but there's so many of them. It's like nah, it's and that's for the exteriors and stuff. Right now, I'm not worried about those at all. Um, and the editors, like I said, they're not really supposed to be seen anyway, so it's like yeah, those aren't necessary. And the other two values, the important ones, the archive number as well as the record number. And the archive is where I will be determining that'll be the most important one. Well, I'll basically be determining like, okay, this is meant to be a treasure thing. This is meant to be a decoration thing that's like dead bodies, other stuff, um, fancy pottery, fancy jewelry, whatever that kind of things, and that'll determine. I'll use that to determine or add or remove value from a room based on those things. And then the other one that I worked on today, which was just basically the same as the billboard one I just did, but instead of doing the Daggerfall billboard object, I did the Daggerfall enemy object that is attached to these Daggerfall entities, these enemy entities, whatever, mobiles. And then with that Daggerfall enemy thing, I was able to get the class type or whatever you want to call it, mobile enemy, which has the more useful attributes that we care about. And I did that by using Daggerfall enemy here dot mobile unit dot summary dot enemy, which is mobile enemy in there. I'm sure there's another way to do it, like doing something as enemy, mobile enemy or something like that, but I don't really. I've done that a few times, just copy and pasting from other stuff, but generally I don't understand how it kind of works that much. So right now I'll just do the way that I kind of see it, how it works. That makes sense. But with mobile enemy, it has attributes such as the mobile ID, which is essentially the value that every enemy has, and it determines what it is at the end of the day. So it's probably its most important value, really. So like 15 is skeletal warriors, like 128 is the thief class enemies. I think 0 is rat or 1 is bat, something like that. Just all the it just determines all the enemies basically. So it's an extremely probably the most useful value of all of them. So you're able to get that. Then another one I decided to take was the mobile affinity, which is a somewhat more minor value, but it kind of gives you like it's useful for certain things like specific flags, like mobile affinity, such as animals, undead, daedra, golem, human, aquatic, water type enemies, stuff like that. Probably not gonna. Well, I might use that like for one thing here and there, but for the most part, just kind of a nice thing to have. And then the other one, mobile teams, which is essentially there for the whole infighting thing. But the reason I'm doing this is because I want to check, even though I don't think this will be a problem in any way, I want to check that the team the enemy is on is not a player, is not player ally. So like a mod such as the follower overhaul, I don't want that to be detected and then like your teammates your party to be detected by that. So if it's player ally, just essentially just ignore it. I think they set them to player ally. I'm pretty sure, but I'm assuming that's how it works. So just ignore them if they're player ally for this specific check that I'm doing, as well as for City Watch, just because it's like, just because they don't need to be here, and the rest of them are allowed. And yeah, later on I will be using the enemy ID most likely for the most part, as well as the enemy affinity, to actually determine what the value is, positive or negative, or other things like traps that are added or stuff such as that, value modifiers and everything. But yeah, so I did that for those two. So I essentially have all those done for those three important ones: models, enemies, and other billboard flats and stuff. And yeah, so tomorrow I'm going to probably try to actually like organize this better, so this is all in one singular for loop. So all these get checked at some point or whatever in the same for loop instead of separate ones. And then with that, afterwards, if I have a list of objects, probably filter down more from there and then use those values to determine what the added or subtracted values to the rooms are and such. But I'll have to be making probably a bunch of switch case checks for the various different things, like the enemy types, their affinities. Probably first the affinities, and then the enemy types themselves, and then the actual like billboards and models and stuff like that, and then using that to determine what values to add and subtract and stuff like that. So that'll be a lot more stuff tomorrow probably, but today this is what I got done. I don't have too much more to say, but yeah, I hope that was helpful in some way maybe, and thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.